Welcome back. Canada Post workers are back on the job following this weekend's order. Ottawa asked the Industrial Relations Board to step in when it determined both sides were at a standstill after a month on strike. Well, to help us better understand the worker perspective, we are joined now by Mark Lubinski. He is the president of the Toronto Local Canadian Union of Postal Workers. Mark, thank you for taking the time. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, Natalie, and thank you for the invitation.
Okay, let's get right to it, because how are workers feeling as they head back tomorrow?
They went back proud, as proud union members, as proud workers. They felt very disappointed with the minister's decision, what he did, especially going around Parliament and just mandating us back to work like he has with two other group of workers just recently. So they felt frustrated that way. They felt frustrated that every time we try to have collective bargaining, have a collective agreement negotiated at the bargaining table, we get legislated back to work. And they all felt, they knew this was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen, because what incentive is there for Canada Post to negotiate at the bargaining table fairly when the government always does this?
Let's talk about what's going to happen now, because workers can expect a 5% pay increase until May. But how far off the mark is that from what you've been hoping for?
Well, Canada Post was offering 11%, over 11% over 4 years. This 5% is just for this year. Off the mark, it doesn't even make up for inflation, for the cost of livings that we have had to live through for the last 3 years. We've fallen behind as postal workers, just like all Canadians have. We received 2% wage increases during the COVID period, where we just agreed to extend our contract because we did not want to go through negotiations like this. We've fallen behind as postal workers. So even just to catch up right now where we are, we would need another 5% just to be even with inflation. So we're actually taking a cut in salary, and that was imposed on us.
Let's talk about some of the other key issues that are happening here. What are the other elements that workers are dealing with? Well,
we had concerns about safe working conditions. Also, what an employer was trying to impose with a new part-time workforce of just 8 hours a week. I know myself, as the casual employment has been around with Canada Post since I've been there. I was a casual employee for 5 years. That was 35 years ago. So Canada Post is not a good employer in means as in sustaining a livable lifestyle. But this new system they want to impose would have gigafied Canada Post, meaning you would be committed to 8 hours working Canada Post, probably commit another 10 hours, so forth, be available to work for Canada Post, and you need a second or third job just to survive. Especially in the city that I live in, Toronto, the cost of living is skyrocketing. Rent has gone up. It's doubled in the last 9 years in Toronto. So how is a letter carrier supposed to survive? Starting letter carrier is $22.68. That's the starting wage of a letter carrier.
Lots of frustration there. I can hear it in your voice as you're talking to me. You and your coworkers have been legislated back to work by the government. So how would you have wanted to see this situation play out differently?
Well, we weren't legislated back to work, because if we were legislated back to work, the government would have followed. It would have been a non-confidence. They mandated us back to work. They went around Parliament. They went around just like they did when two other employers locked out their workers. This time, Canada Post, it was a lockout strike, not a lockout strike at the same time. But government to do this is totally irresponsible. The minister was totally irresponsible. Minister Ducot was responsible for Canada Post. Was responsible because he's been hiding for the last 3 weeks. Canada Post talked about losses, and they talked about how can we give this to the workers. They're the ones that create the losses. They use their reserves to cover their losses, but their sales staff has been working from home for the last 2 years. The management, it's top-heavy with management, but something I can't discuss as a union rep on the consultation with the managers there, because I'm at the Toronto level there, and Canada Post always says it's their business. Someone should be accountable. Someone needs to be accountable. Canada Post is owned by Canadians. It's owned by the government, but no one is accountable. The government needs to be accountable. So does the minister.
The negotiations, we know, according to the media, had stalled. Now we have this mandated back to work, not legislated. Thank you. Poor choice of words on my part there. I just am wondering, because this mandate of back to work extends until May. How likely do you think it is that another strike could happen in May?
Well, I think this gives some breathing time for Canada, for the government to think of something differently, because I guess they didn't change it, didn't send it to arbitration because they wanted to save some face for themselves. But I'm very concerned of what's happening with the government. I want the government to take us 55,000 postal workers seriously. We're just the middle class. We're just trying to survive in the high inflation rate. So if we went on strike in December, we're legislated back to work. Go on strike in May. Come on, that's not something the union wants to do. We weren't heard being off for a month before Christmas. And we empathize with everyone. We empathize with small businesses. It was just something that's Canada Post. It's not a fair negotiator. It doesn't really care about giving us a fair wage. They talk about their losses. They have their spokesperson making a lot of money. I got $56.25 on the picket line. I'm a postal worker. I'm just the middle class. Now all we want to do is survive. We want our members to survive, and we're not only fighting for current workers. We're fighting for new members, new workers. It's a crown corporation. It's a public post office. We should have decent jobs at Canada Post to have a respectable wage and living conditions.
Mark, thank you so much for your time. That was Mark Lubinski, president of the Toronto Local Canadian Union of Postal Workers.